The King's Village Rose by Andrea Cubis. So I apologize, it feels like it has been a very long time since I've had the chance to sit down and do some painting. It has just been, well, life just happened, and we all have those periods, and it's okay to go through those periods of time where you just, you can't really predict what's going to happen. So for my first comeback on this one, I felt like doing a large painting of a rose. So what you saw me do there, I was outlining the rose using a water-soluble graphite. It's like a pencil, but unlike a pencil, when the paint goes on it, it dissolves into the paint, hence the water-soluble part. If you use regular pencil, what you might find in your lighter colors, the pencil might shine through in ways that you don't want. And I really didn't want any pencil shining through. So I started off putting in whites and yellows for my highlighted areas. So I was looking at this picture of a beautiful red rose, and I wanted to do an underpainting that helped pull out those bright spots while creating the main form of this rose. As I go through this painting, you're going to note that I change my mind a couple of times and have to go over it a couple of times, and that's kind of all part of that process. Sometimes you have an idea and it only kind of half takes you to where you want to go, so you got to keep going and trying until it gets to where you want to go. At this point, I started working into the shadows. For the shadows, I made a deep blue using a mix of blue and red to kind of, without it getting purple, it stayed blue. I wanted to keep it on the icier side. And I simply was going in and filling in the places where the shadows, the dark corners exist within the rose. One of the hard parts about the rose, unlike the daisy, it's not flat. It's all about where's the light hitting and where's the light not hitting and where does the shadow fall. And if you can kind of think of it like that, I think you're going to have an easier time painting a rose. Because if you keep thinking about it as a flat, two-dimensional flower, more daisy-like, you're going to find that you just end up with a solid color going all the way across, and you're not going to get the depth of the rose. As you see, I'm kind of going through. In this picture, there were two light sources. There was one coming off the left, and that was the main light source. But there was also a less brilliant light source coming from the right. And you can kind of see that on those back petals on the right, that there is light coming from another direction. It's not as bright, but it still gets representation there. At this point, I was now trying to bring in some of the other parts of the rose with the leaves and the stems, using that same idea of shadow versus light, because even though they're different colors, they still were getting hit by the light and the shadows. Now at this point, I did actually kind of sit back and go, wow, that's a cool rose. And I did have to bait just leaving it the way it was. But the truth is, I really wanted a red rose, so I kept going. I was adding the yellow to try and create a warmth instead of that icy harshness of the white. I thought by throwing some golden yellow underneath, when I came in with the red, it would help warm it up. Now you're seeing the red come in. And at first, it's not too bad, but it's not the vivid red I really wanted. But I kept working it all the way around so that whatever I changed afterwards would be even as well. You'll find, or at least I find, as I paint, I go through phases, and I think it's because, unfortunately, I don't get to paint as my full-time job. This is something I do after my full-time job. So there are days I get home from my job and I have nothing to give to painting. And as much as I hate to say that, there is some truth in that, and you have to honor that within yourself. With that said, if I've had a rough day at work, I sometimes find coming and painting will help that rough day not feel quite so despairing. The painting sometimes makes me feel as though I have a little more say in what's going on around me. What you're seeing me put in right here, I'm actually going to cover up in about 3 seconds, I'm sure, because it didn't work. I really wanted to bring those petals forward by making them nice and bright. And I realized that it wasn't quite what I wanted, and I ended up coming back over with some more red, and that's why you see that sudden change. As I looked at it, I started to realize one of the reasons it did seem quite so lit up is not because my highlights weren't highlighted enough, it's because my shadows weren't dark enough. So I had to go back through and redo my shadows and make them even darker than that blue that was in there. And a part of doing that, I also was trying to smooth out my lines, because I was finding my lines were getting very willy-nilly all over the place, and I didn't want that. I wanted this rose to be crisp, especially considering this rose was trying to, I've called it the Kingsville rose. My hope is that this rose could be seen something as worthy for a king's village, not the king's castle. I don't think it's quite there. It needs to have 500 other roses with it for it to be worthy of the king's castle. But this is that solitary rose that when the king comes through the village, it would draw his attention. For whatever reason, maybe it smelled really good, those clean, crisp lines, the brilliancy of that red, it would draw his attention from all the other flowers that were in that village. This rose would be the one that the king notices. Not picks, not grows, simply notices. And that's why I called this the King's Village Rose. As well, anyone who knows me knows I am from Kingsville. So it was kind of a play on the two things working together. So now you're seeing I'm coming over again with the red again, because I wanted that red to be a very obvious red. No question, is it a pink rose? Is it an orange rose? No, this is a red rose on a clear blue sky day. No questions about it. The sun is shining on this rose, just as the king would shine on this rose. Sometimes when you're painting, you need to allow yourself to get lost into those details. Which way is the light coming, or what shade of red are we looking at? Is that the red? And that's why I went over this rose so many times, is because it took me a while to get the right red by having all the shadows and the highlights working with that red without it turning pink or turning purple. And that's tough about red, because red can be confused with all its related colors so easily if it's too close to another color. And that's why I picked that very bright blue for the background, because I wanted that red to be in a good contrast to it. You'll find as I was moving along, I kept trying to make sure my brush strokes went with the movement of the petals. So sometimes my hand is going at a very strange angle, and it's because I'm trying to keep those brush strokes going along the veins of the rose. Otherwise, I was finding it was losing its shape, and that helped keep my brush strokes in the right areas. Coming close here to the end, the one thing that I kept looking at was the fact that I wanted sun to be more relevant in this picture. Not that I wanted the sun in the picture, but I wanted the effects of the sun in the picture. And here at the very end, you're going to see that I put what I consider splashes of sunshine directly onto the rose, with little yellow highlights, and they're coming any minute now. I know it, it's coming. I know I've done all that detail work on the, oh, here it is. Here's the yellow started to come in. Sorry, I got distracted by those leaves and stem. I did good work on those too by getting the shadows and the highlights coming in. But now you're going to start to see those very bright yellow splashes of sun that I wanted on the rose to say this rose is standing out in a sunny day, nice clear blue sky, and that sun is shining down on the rose, and that sun is the metaphor of the king shining on this rose. And you gotta understand, I mean, I live in Kingsville in Ontario, Canada. So what that means is the monarchy from Britain has had a huge influence on the structure of my home country and my hometown. And I appreciate and honor that influence. So thank you so much for watching the King's Village Rose. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you come back.